Okay, kids, we're back and we're moving along through the textbook. Today we're in section 7.8. I'll have you read about that today, and I think there's only one question today. So we're all about interference of sound waves. So, like any wave, sound waves interfere with each other. Now, where have we seen that before? Well, I want you to recall two waves on a spring interfering with each other. So you would have a wave here coming in from one side, another wave coming in from the other side, and then they would meet here. We've studied this in the past, and they would interfere with each other. So what I've written here is depending on the speed, the wavelength, and the frequency of the waves, a standing wave pattern can be produced. Remember the standing wave patterns? Remember what they look like? The standing wave pattern was a one-dimensional interference pattern because everything is sort of either a constructive or destructive interference along a line here. So what was the pattern that was created? Well, we had these areas called loops, also known as antinodes, and this was an area of constructive interference always occurring there, and you'd get large amplitudes. Always, right there. Here was a loop, an antinode. Here was a loop, an antinode. Here was a loop, an antinode. And you also had areas where you had continual destructive interference. I have them in red here, and they're called nodes. And you would have zero amplitude there. So this was two waves coming together, interfering with each other, and the interference pattern was standing. It was static. It wasn't moving. And we talked about that previously. So now what we want to do is we want to extend this idea of a standing wave pattern, all right? But we want to extend it to 3 dimensions. So how will that work? Well, right here, let's say you have a speaker. It's a red speaker. We're going to call it speaker number one. And speaker number one is going to produce sound waves. So there'll be a compression and then a rarefaction, a compression and rarefaction as these compressions and rarefactions are created and leave speaker number one and move outward. While that's happening at exactly the same wavelength, exactly the same frequency, exactly the same speed, speaker number two is creating a sound wave. I've made them blue here. So speaker number two is creating compression, rarefaction, and they're moving out. Well, out here in this three-dimensional volume out here, they're going to interfere with each other. So that's what I have written here. The two sound waves will produce a three-dimensional interference pattern. That's difficult to visualize. So what we do is we say, yeah, we know it's three-dimensional, but it's easier to visualize in 2 dimensions. So we just take a cross section of it and work on that. So here's a picture straight from the textbook. Speaker one, speaker two. The solid lines are compressions. So here's a compression from speaker two. Here's a compression from speaker two. All the solid lines, compression. Same thing from speaker one. Compression, compression, compression. And it has to be a sound wave, so each speaker is producing rarefactions. Here they are. Okay, oops, made a little error there. Let me fix that. The rarefaction is actually here. That's much better. All right, so each speaker, the dashed lines, are creating rarefactions. Well, if you were to stand here and listen to the two speakers playing at the same time, if you were to stand along this line right here, this would be a line of loud sounds because along this line you always have compressions from each wave meeting and rarefactions from each wave meeting, right? So here you get constructive interference along here all the time. It would sound loud to you. Similarly here, look, compression, excuse me, rarefaction from one meets rarefaction from the other, or compressions meet, right? Always the same thing. Solid line meets solid line. Dashed line meets dashed line. And remember, solid lines mean compression, dashed lines mean refraction. So you would continually, if you were to put your ear here or here or here along these lines, it would sound loud. But if you just shift over a little bit, look what's happening here. A compression from one source is meeting a rarefaction from the other source. Destructive interference. It would not be that loud here. Look at, see how it's always solid line meeting dashed line? Destructive interference. Similarly here. Take a look at that. Destructive interference always along here. So we get to name these. These lines here, here, and here are lines of constructive interference. It would be loud there. These lines here, I got it in blue here, even here, lines of destructive interference. If you were standing there, it would not be that loud. It would be like the node from the standing wave. And here, where you have constructive interference, it would be like the antinode or the loops in a standing wave on a spring. But it's sound waves. It's more than that dimension. So I've put a link to this website. So picture this as one speaker creating compression refractions of a longitudinal sound wave. Here's another speaker creating compressions and refractions of a longitudinal sine wave. And those compressions and refractions move out into the volume around the two speakers into the space. And where it's grayed out, destructive interference. It would, if you were standing there, it would not be that loud. Destructive interference, compressions continually meeting refractions. In here and here, where it's not grayed out, where you see the bright and dark continually moving, this would be an area of constructive interference. It would sound loud to you if you were standing there. Here's another simulation I've put a link to. You can play around with it. The red lines are lines of constructive interference. If you take a look here along the red line, it's always compression meeting compression or refraction meeting refraction. And there's a variety of red lines here. If you move this to a blue line right here, destructive interference where compression from one meet refraction from another continually. I've also added a YouTube video for you to watch. There's a nice little professor or teacher. He does a good job with these physics demos. It's what I would have done in class, but unfortunately we're not in class together. And he's going to actually show this in real life with two speakers set up and a microphone set up, so you can actually see it's not just something I made up in a computer simulation. You actually have areas of loud sound and soft sounds around two speakers in real life. So watch that, read the textbook, and we'll get through this topic today. Thank you. Bye-bye. Have a great day.